These are the people who vote with us in the international organizations. These are the people who send soldiers to go to war with us when we are fighting, in the Middle East, when we're fighting any sort of war. Canada sends...
The View is losing it over Trump and exposing their own hypocrisy in real time. The ladies of The View are absolutely fuming over Donald Trump's latest political wins, leading to yet another meltdown, a spectacle of hypocrisy. This time, they're losing their minds over Trump's tariffs, twisting the issue into yet another over-the-top attack on America, because let's be real, tearing down their own country seems to be their favorite pastime. They spent an entire segment venting their outrage, painting Trump's economic policies as some catastrophic disaster while conveniently ignoring their own past takes on tariffs. But here's where things take a bizarre turn. Sunny Hostin, in the middle of her anti-Trump tirade, accidentally endorsed RFK Jr. Yep, she fumbled so hard that even her own audience wasn't having it. The same crowd that usually cheers like programmed robots for every anti-Trump remark suddenly turned on her. They booed loudly. Turns out even The View's audience has its limits when it comes to blindly following the script. And then there's Ana Navarro. Oh, Ana. She somehow managed to make Trump's tariff policy about herself. She was absolutely offended that Trump dared to pressure Mexico with tariffs, taking it to a whole new level of absurdity.
It's soldiers. These are the people that have been biased time and time again, that send their pilots and their planes to help us put out our fires, literally and figuratively. These are our friends, and we are treating them like trash. We are bullying them. And it's as if, I look at this thing in Mexico and I'm thinking, okay, as if deporting good, hardworking immigrants wasn't enough. As if emboldening the racial profiling and bigotry against Latinos wasn't enough. As if revoking temporary protective status for 500,000 Venezuelans wasn't enough. As if bullying Panama wasn't enough. Now he's going to tax our tequila and avocado?
Instead of discussing the actual policy, she dramatically complained about one thing: the price of her tequila going up. That's right, she reduced an entire economic debate to her personal inconvenience. Watch how she turns this into a full-blown tragedy because, in The View's world, a price hike on alcohol is apparently a national emergency. The left's obsession with letting Canada and Mexico exploit the US makes no sense. Let's cut through the nonsense for a second. Why is the left so determined to let Canada and Mexico bleed the US dry just because we've been allies in the past? Seriously, what kind of logic is that? Look at what's happening right now. The migrant crisis is spiraling out of control. Mexico's borders are a revolving door, funneling millions of illegal crossings straight into the US. And it's not just people. Fentanyl pouring in from cartels running unchecked in Mexico is devastating American cities. The result? Thousands of American lives lost every year. And yet, despite all this, we're somehow supposed to just keep our mouths shut while we hand over billions in trade deals? Let's talk numbers. Every single year, the US runs a $100 billion trade deficit with these countries. That's a massive wealth transfer. And yet, the moment we suggest maybe they should help us secure the border to stop this chaos, we're the bad guys. The hypocrisy is mind-blowing. And speaking of hypocrisy, let's talk about Democrats' so-called compassion. They love to act like they're the moral ones, but their policies tell a much darker story. They champion illegal immigration, pretending they're helping migrants, but in reality, they're creating a modern-day system of exploitation. They push for illegal migrants to flood into the country, only to turn around and say, "But who else will pick our vegetables?" Sound familiar? It should, because that's nearly identical to what Democrats said in the 1850s to justify slavery. They don't even see it. They're encouraging trafficked migrants to risk their lives crossing dangerous borders, only to end up in the US working for pennies in grueling conditions with no legal protection, just so they can have cheap labor and lower food prices. And yet, they have the audacity to call themselves the party of compassion.
I'll just say, Mexico, Canada, and China together accounted for more than 40% of total U.S. imports last year. But more importantly, Canada and Mexico are the top buyers of U.S. exports in more than 72% of all export categories. 72%. We send our stuff over there. So now if there are these tariffs, That's going to cause problems, billions of dollars of problems. And if the tariffs, if they in turn return the tariffs, let's say it's your coffee, you have a coffee store, and you're going to sell a cup of coffee, and your coffee is $5. We know how expensive coffee is, right? Yeah. You sell coffee for $5. Now the coffee beans coming in from Mexico are now $5 more. You think if I own that shop, I'm going to eat that $5? No. Your cup of coffee just costs $10. Well, and that's the...
But here's the real kicker. Like almost everything the Democrats do, their policies, disguised as virtue, end up being more harmful, more racist, and more destructive than the very problems they claim to be solving. They pat themselves on the back, pretending to be the champions of the marginalized while actively pushing policies that exploit and endanger the very people they claim to protect. It's a never-ending cycle, virtue signaling for applause while creating disasters that real Americans are left to clean up. And trust me, we're just getting warmed up because The View had a whole lot more nonsense to spew, and somehow it just kept getting worse. You'd think they'd eventually pause and reflect, maybe realize how ridiculous they sound, but nope. Instead, they just double down on their own ignorance. And this time, it was Sunny Hostin who delivered one of the most laughable, brain-melting takes we've heard in a while. Now let's talk about Sunny Hostin's latest masterpiece of stupidity, AI. Shining example of why college can be an absolute scam. We're talking about a woman with a law degree, someone who supposedly had years of higher education, standing there with a straight face, dropping one of the dumbest takes ever recorded on live television. She confidently declared, "So your $5 cup of coffee, when it gets hit with a 25% tariff, is now $10. Let that sink in. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. This wasn't a joke. This was her actual understanding of economics. And this woman, this college-educated lawyer, thought she was making a profound point. This is exactly why people are waking up to the fact that college degrees don't automatically mean intelligence. Schools are just handing out diplomas like participation trophies, turning out graduates who can't even grasp basic math. And the worst part? They're convinced they're smarter than everyone else. They walk around, heads held high, oozing superiority, as if their degree is a golden ticket to being right about everything. In reality, they're just as clueless as the people they love to look down on. And let's not forget the way they weaponize this so-called education in politics. Every time someone brags about Kamala Harris winning the educated vote, all I can think about is Sunny Hostin proudly proving why that means absolutely nothing. If this is what passes for intelligence in their world, then maybe, just maybe, it's time we stop pretending their opinions are worth anything more than a bad joke.
And Canadian citizens showed how they felt about these tariffs at NBA and NHL games over the weekend. Take a look. I've never seen anything like that in my life.
Never.
I'm sorry. And I have to say, even the conservative media is warning about the price Americans are going to pay for this. So, I mean, everybody's saying, hey, this is a bad idea, this is a bad idea, this is a bad idea.
It doesn't quite sound as impressive when you phrase it like Kamala Harris won the Sunny Hostin IQ vote. Suddenly, it loses all that supposed prestige, doesn't it? People often ask me, why do you even bother watching The View? And here's my answer. Because they sell themselves as a credible news talk show. That's the real issue. It's not just some goofy daytime fluff where a bunch of out-of-touch celebrities sip mimosas and talk about the weekend. No, The View positions itself as a legitimate political platform. And unfortunately, this is what the other side is actually listening to. This is where they're getting their information. And that's exactly why it matters. We have to recognize the actual impact of this nonsense. Because if we don't, we let it spread unchecked. It's the art of war, lesson 1. You need to understand what the opposition is thinking in order to counter it. If The View was just a lighthearted brunch gossip show, I wouldn't waste a second watching it. But the real problem is that they pretend to be serious political commentators. They sit down with actual politicians, and because of that, people assume they must be a legitimate news source. The result? Viewers on the left buy into every ridiculous take they push, never questioning. Whether it's based in reality, they watch their favorite host interview a senator and think, well, this must be the truth. not realizing they're just being spoon-fed propaganda. That's why this show is more than just an irritating daytime spectacle. It's a political weapon. People are drinking the Kool-Aid they're serving, blindly accepting the nonsense as fact. And worse, it's radicalizing them. It's pushing them further and further into a world of delusion, where every conservative is a villain, every policy disagreement is a personal attack, and every narrative is manipulated to fit their agenda. This isn't just mindless entertainment. It's dangerous to democracy. And now we have Whoopi Goldberg, the self-proclaimed philosopher of nonsense, stepping up to deliver another gem of wisdom. This time, she's here to tell us why we're actually the bad guys for expecting our neighbors to be, well, better neighbors. Yes, you heard that right. According to Whoopi, asking other countries to secure their own borders and stop fueling the problems that are hurting Americans somehow makes us the villains. And right here is the entire problem with the virtue signaling left.
And what makes America the most powerful nation on earth is that we have friends and allies. And it's because we engage in international trade, we don't bully our friends, we show up and give international aid. And if we stop doing that, which is what I feel like Trump is leaning into, I'm not saying that that's fully what he's doing yet, we're ceding our role of global superpower to China because they will step in, they will show up, and they will be friends to the people that we're giving not a nice signal to in Canada and elsewhere.
It's never about real solutions or actually helping people. It's about creating outrage while ensuring they never take responsibility for the mess their own policies create. They are obsessed with making sure everyone likes us. It's like their whole identity depends on needing the world to see us as kind, compassionate, and morally superior, even if it means getting trampled. Honestly, I don't think even a high schooler cares this much about what random people think. It's embarrassing. So, according to Whoopi, we shouldn't ask Canada or Mexico to step up on border security. We shouldn't expect fair trade deals. We shouldn't push for anything that benefits America because, brace yourself, it might hurt someone's feelings. That's right. Forget policy. Forget national security. Forget fairness. None of that matters as long as we don't offend anyone. And if that means a few salty Canadians booing our anthem, well, I guess we're supposed to sit there and take it. Oh no. How will we recover? But let's get real for a second. The NHL and NBA are majority American leagues. If they hate us so much, if they really think we're the bad guys just because we have a president who isn't letting us get ripped off, why don't they leave? Why don't they start their own hockey league, their own basketball league? I mean, aren't those their sports? Oh wait, that's right. They like the money. They like the prestige, the opportunity, and everything that comes with being connected to America. But the second we start standing up for ourselves, suddenly we're the villains. Funny how that works. It was fine when we were the ones getting screwed over. The moment we say, hey, how about fairness? They don't want to be our friends anymore. Maybe they never were. Think about it this way. If I had a friend who only stuck around because I paid for his food, his rides, his fun, and the moment I asked him to pitch in, he turned on me, was he ever really my friend? Or just using me the whole time? Yeah, I'd drop that freeloader fast. And speaking of people getting cut off, here comes Alyssa talking about Trump cutting foreign aid. Now, usually, she's one of the more reasonable voices on The View, but today, well, it gets interesting. This is where Whoopi Goldberg, in all her wisdom, starts lecturing the audience on why other countries refuse to accept American food exports.
I'd like to point out that there is a reason people don't really take a lot of our things that we export, because the quality of what we put out has not always been the best. When we look at the what's in our foods, other countries won't accept food from us if it's chock full of the stuff that
Preservatives and
we allow to go through. So you can talk about making American and building American, but that also requires that we make big changes as to how we do things.
Maybe R.F. Kennedy Jr. can fix that.
But there's
They have no idea how to recover. They're not having real conversations. They're just reciting a script. And the moment someone goes off script, even by accident, the entire machine malfunctions. It's the same reason they react with total hysteria when a guest with an opposing viewpoint actually pushes back. They don't debate. They don't engage. They gang up, shout down, and then pat themselves on the back for winning an argument they never even had. They thrive in an echo chamber where they never have to be challenged. So when Sunny accidentally blurts out something that makes sense, it doesn't just make her look bad, it exposes the entire operation. It reveals how robotic and scripted the whole thing is. Because if even one of their own slips up and momentarily speaks the truth, the entire illusion starts to crack. It's not about critical thinking. It's about loyalty to the narrative. The second you step out of line, you get the booze. That's why RFK Jr. makes them nervous. Not because he's extreme, but because he refuses to follow the script. And for a moment, Sunny Hostin forgot. Hers. The audience froze. Wait, what? You told us he was bad. Why say he's the guy to fix this? Sunny tried to play it off as sarcasm, but halfway through she realized her mistake. You could see it all over her face. Oops, I just made sense. Now I look like an idiot. So, is she actually that clueless? Or is it just performative nonsense? It's not just The View melting down. CNN is too. Scott Jennings had to school an entire panel on why Trump's tariff threats led to a major win. But the media's in full denial mode. Instead of admitting it, they spin it. Oh, Mexico already had troops at the border. Really? Then why was the crisis worse than ever in 2021? And Canada? They already promised to spend money? That's like telling your mom you'll clean your room but never actually doing it. Saying it doesn't mean it happened. She comes back 2 hours later, the room's still a mess. Can you clean your room? Yeah, I promise. 3 hours later, still dirty. No, Mom, I'm committing to it. That's Canada and Mexico. They promise to do something but never actually do it. Then Trump steps in, puts his foot down, and suddenly, things start moving. But the media can't admit that because it would mean Trump was right. They'd rather rewrite reality than give him credit. Now imagine Dad comes home, leather belt in hand, phone gone, video games gone, TV gone, lights off. He hands you a candle and a Bible and says, "This is your life until that room is clean." That's Trump. Sure, you can announce you're spending $1.3 billion, but when is it actually happening? And here's the kicker. Trump didn't just get vague promises. He forced real action. A fence, 24/7 border monitoring, $200 million extra in spending, and a joint task force with the US. That's exactly why Canada and Mexico are terrible partners. If they actually cared, why did it take Trump threatening to tank their economies for them to finally step up? Because Democrats live in a fantasy world where leaders politely ask for things, and other nations just say, "Of course, let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya."
Trump got rolled by both of these countries, and no one, least of all Trump, seems to have realized it. Both the leaders of Mexico and Canada have agreed to do what they have already been doing. It's just that Trump didn't seem to know about it.
Both Mexico and Canada have reached agreements today with Donald Trump to do what we want them to do, which is to put people and technology and resources at the border to stop the flow of people and drugs, illegal immigration, stem the tide. That is the whole point of this exercise, and that is apparently what is happening. And yes, there have been some troops there in Mexico. This is an agreement to do permanent deployment. And yes, some of this stuff in Canada was already announced, but now they were dragging their feet. Now their feet are held to the fire. They've got 30 days to really implement, and they can't pussyfoot around anymore. So the point of this exercise today, to me, had less to do with trade and more to do with saying to our neighbors, you need to be...
They have no idea how to recover. They're not having real conversations. They're just reciting a script. And the moment someone goes off script, even by accident, the entire machine malfunctions. It's the same reason they react with total hysteria when a guest with an opposing viewpoint actually pushes back. They don't debate. They don't engage. They gang up, shout down, and then pat themselves on the back for winning an argument they never even had. They thrive in an echo chamber where they never have to be challenged. So when Sunny accidentally blurts out something that makes sense, it doesn't just make her look bad. It exposes the entire operation. It reveals how robotic and scripted the whole thing is. Because if even one of their own slips up and momentarily speaks the truth, the entire illusion starts to crack. It's not about critical thinking. It's about loyalty to the narrative. The second you step out of line, you get the booze. That's why RFK Jr. makes them nervous. Not because he's extreme, but because he refuses to follow the script. And for a moment, Sunny Hostin forgot. Hers. The audience froze. Wait, what? You told us he was bad. Why say he's the guy to fix this? Sunny tried to play it off as sarcasm, but halfway through, she realized her mistake. You could see it all over her face. Oops, I just made sense. Now I look like an idiot. So is she actually that clueless, or is it just performative nonsense? It's not just The View melting down. CNN is too. Scott Jennings had to school an entire panel on why Trump's tariff threats led to a major win. But the media's in full denial mode. Instead of admitting it, they spin it. Oh, Mexico already had troops at the border. Really? Then why was the crisis worse than ever in 2021? And Canada? They already promised to spend money. That's like telling your mom you'll clean your room but never actually doing it. Saying it doesn't mean it happened. She comes back 2 hours later, the room's still a mess. Can you clean your room? Yeah, I promise. 3 hours later, still dirty. No, Mom, I'm committing to it. That's Canada and Mexico. They promise to do something but never actually do it. Then Trump steps in, puts his foot down, and suddenly things start moving. But the media can't admit that because it would mean Trump was right. They'd rather rewrite reality than give him credit. Now imagine Dad comes home, leather belt in hand. Phone gone, video games gone, TV gone, lights off. He hands you a candle and a Bible and says, "This is your life until that room is clean." That's Trump. Sure, you can announce you're spending $1.3 billion, but when is it actually happening? And here's the kicker. Trump didn't just get vague promises, he forced real action. A fence, 24/7 border monitoring, $200 million extra in spending, and a joint task force with the US. That's exactly why Canada and Mexico are terrible partners. If they actually cared, why did it take Trump threatening to tank their economies for them to finally step up? Because Democrats live in a fantasy world where leaders politely ask for things, and other nations just say, "Of course, let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya."